SwayamPrabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Let us start this lecture with a thought process by Gautam Buddha. Little by little a person becomes evil as a water pot is filled by drops of water. Little by little a person becomes good as a water pot is filled by drops of water. In the last lecture, we had initiated certain discussion on temple tank systems whichever were there in ancient India. If you look at temple plays a very important role in our life, particularly in ancient time. It was the center for propagation of education, heritage, culture and also the technology to larger extent which controls the life of common human being. And therefore, the temples were having water tanks which were not being used for everyday uses, rather it being utilized for vital purposes, for recharging the underground aquifers, reducing the runoff, enhancing the water stagnation time, thus ensuring sufficient water in the domestic wells during the summer months. Let us look at one example where we will see that lot of water bodies around a temple, that is Jagannath temple in Puri of Odisha. This is the beautiful temple I have shown here, but if you look at we are discussing not about the temple structure, rather about the water bodies around this temple. The one tank which is known as Narendra Sarovar was constructed basically during this temple construction, but however the history says that this pond was created during 13th century by Narendra Mahapatra, the minister of Kavi Narasimha Deva in 13th century, at a distance around 1 kilometer on the north side of Sri Jagannath temple, and the size is 873 feet long and 743 wide. It is quite a huge tank. I have shown here in these pictures, which you can see that the center of this huge sarovar, or what we call in English pond, it is having a small temple also, and which is having the utility maybe for the architectural beauty, one is, but other things it would be that it will be acting as the measure of water in the tank. Beside this, not in this sarovar or the pond, but in other places some step well are being used to recharge the water inside. And here very interesting thing, if you look at, this is the bridge which is there for people to move around, and this is the corbellal system is being used, if you look at, and that similar structures are there in the various other bridges which were being built in ancient time. Beside this, there are several other water tanks, like Indradumna tank is located near Gundicha temple, which is around 3 km from the Jagannath temple, and Rohini Kunda is a sacred well located within the Jagannath temple premise, and the Markandra tank is around 4 acre in size in the Markandeswar temple, which is located southwest of the Jagannath Mandir in Markandeswar Sai area, and Swetaganga tank is located to the south of the temple, and these are the tanks which are existing, but there might be several other tanks which are not associated with the temple, but will be around. Some of them might be acquired by the people, because today there is a maniac for grabbing the land across the country. Let us look at actually a research work is being done by CPR Environmental Education Center Chennai, who took up survey of something 175 temple tanks in the South India, and they have also made a very nice map here which you can see. But their work was mainly concentrated on the southern side, particularly Tamil Nadu, where you can see 116 water bodies associated with the temples, they could locate at few years back. And beside this, of course, Andhra, Karnataka, and then Kerala they have. But in other places the numbers are very meager. It cannot be, according to me, the numbers will be much higher so far the sacred water bodies are concerned. And we need to do research on this, and let me just tell you, give some data from them, that Tamil Nadu, the 39 temple tanks were with the area from 0.25 to 3 hectares, it's very huge. These temple tanks were revered no less than the temple itself. That means they consider this as divine as the temple. That much of importance were given to the water bodies at that time. Of course not today, because we are using the water from in a pipe and supplied by the government or local bodies, and we are not careful about the water uses, and it's considering it as a divine. Some of these sacred tanks supported a variety of life forms which helped to maintain the cleanliness of the tank in the natural way. But in modern time we are using mechanical way, we will be putting some kind of water purification systems which are in the market, but their nature does the purification. That is the thing we need to learn, so that we need not to pay money to the people, and which is unnatural. Lot of chemicals are entering in the process of purification of water into our body, and it is spoiling also. But unfortunately these systems which were there in the ancient India and associated with the temple and other sacred structures, those are being declined and deteriorated over the years, and because of that most of the ancient temple tanks have fallen into a state of repair and disuse, because most of the technologies in ancient India needs the regular maintenance, which we didn't do. Unchecked extraction has led to the dying of some of the temple tanks, because people were using sparingly the water, but today people use it profusely, right? They do not have concern for that. And pressure on the land, which I had told earlier, that today people want to grab the land, and have led to the encouragement of these dried out tanks. And not only the sacred tank, also the other tanks which are being used, secular tanks which are being used earlier by the people, are being taken over by the builders and then other people. And many tanks have become sinks for the sewage and the garbage of the neighborhood. Now, like water system is fall apart. If you look at the water system is basically in the turmoil today, whatever we are existing in the ancient India. And let us now talk about irrigation system in ancient India. A question might be coming to your mind, what do you mean by irrigation, why is irrigation required, and was irrigation system present in ancient India? If you look at irrigation, is basically a method of supplying water to the field for growth of crops, because crops is very important for the life, and I consider that it is the primary wealth, right? Agriculture is the primary wealth, the crops are the primary wealth of us, and the rest of the earth are secondary wealth. But unfortunately the entire world including India is running after secondary wealth. But still India is considered as the agriculture country since time immemorial, and also will remain for years to come, because India is a populous country and food is essential. As our scripture says, Anna Patishta Deva, that means without food you cannot really do anything. So therefore we need to produce food, and for that irrigation is essential. Keep in mind that according to Krishna Swami, India was the international producer in prehistoric age. Unfortunately today also we are producing, but using chemical fertilizers and other things. But we need to go back to our natural way of farming, which I had discussed earlier. For that irrigation is very important and essential when rainfall is not sufficient or occurs in the wrong season, because like there is a climate change. Therefore the rainfall is very erratic, and we need to now learn how to face the challenges created by the climate change and global warming. And by use of irrigation system in ancient India, and also we can improvise it, we can have at least 2 crops in a year to meet the demand of the food in this country. The irrigation system can be divided broadly into 2 categories. One is natural, other is artificial. Natural means basically with the help of rivers, springs, lakes means natural lakes, and rain waters and others. Artificial means we will have to use tanks, pools, and then wells, embankments, dams, etc., so that we can store the water, rain water, and also the flowing water, so that we can utilize for the irrigation. So, let us look at historical perspective of irrigation system, and if you go back to the Indus Valley civilization, to the Mohenjo-daro and Harappan sites, you will find that also the evidence of the food grains like wheat, barley, and sesame, peas, etc., where some of the winter crops, right, which require irrigation system help of barrages and canals. And I remember that I had shown you that people were having, particularly in Mohenjo-daro sites, like there is a way of utilizing the canals for the irrigation purposes, and the excavation sites in Rajasthan desert indicates presence of irrigation canals. Seasonal damming rivers on the smaller branches helps in inundates the lands with the silts on a smaller river banks, enhancing its fertility for agriculture. See, in modern dams there is a problem, always the silt is a big problem of getting deposited on the dam itself or in the canal also to blocking the portion. But earlier days people were using these silts for the as a fertilizers in the land, that by the method of inundation and irrigation system, which we will be discussing little bit later on. And the pottery specimen of deep grooves and large number of wells found at Mohenjo-daro suggest possibility of raising water for irrigation purposes. During Vedic period, water was considered as auspicious and utmost important component of life, and according to Rig Veda, the water sources can be classified as rainwater, water by digging soils, water oozed from a spring, and river and streams. So, if you look at it, can be basically 2 types of irrigation systems what we had discussed earlier were known to the Vedic farmers, that is the natural and artificials. If you look at the water management at the Dholavira, you can see that this is the remnants of a dam. On one side there is a nalas, means basically a canal you can say, or a drain, canals, so that it is given some of these portions people are saying it was might be a dam kind of thing. And beside this, people have conjectured also the how they could have a structure to strengthen the dams. They were thinking that palisade fences of the wood or metal stakes, these are the wood kind of things, and horizontal, and then these are vertical being placed inside the soil, so that it will give a structural support to take the water load due to the during the floods and other thing on the channels. So, these are the things people are thinking it might be having. And let us look at some more historical perspective of irrigation system. In pre-Mauryan period, irrigation from water of river, canals were used profusely, and construction of dam was considered as an act of auspicious and social duty. It is even today also we feel that kind of social obligation, particularly if you talk with the old people in villages, remote villages, not modern villages, right, you will find that it is very important to have wells to be dug by the people, and that is the practice which we are having earlier days. And even if you go to the Sabha Prabha of Mahabharata, Narada is asking Yudhishthira, are large tanks and lakes constructed all over the kingdom at proper distance without agriculture being in the thy realm of entirely dependent on showers and heavens. That means if you go to the even the story of Mahabharata, it also very clearly says that they were not relying on the rain or the for the crops, they were having irrigation system in place, and which was the duty of a king to provide, and so also maintained by the people. And Hathi Gumpa of Bhubaneswar, a Kharavar period around 100 AD, depicts about the canal from Tosali river. I mean, if you look at the canal system was there in 100 AD, that is the evidence we are having. And Mauryan period gave much more importance to agriculture and irrigation systems. Sudarshan Lake started by Pushyagupta, the governor of Chandragupta, and completed by Tusapa, the governor of Asoka, was mentioned in the Indica Megasthenes, the book written by Megasthenes. And Arthashastra provides more importance to irrigation supported by the state and people. In 200 AD, the Sudarshan Lake was constructed by Pushyagupta, got damaged due to the flood, which was repaired during the reign of Rudradaman I. And during Gupta period, the Sudarshan Lake was constructed during the reign of Skandagupta, incurring a huge cost. That means, if you look at this kind of lake and the water bodies, artificial water bodies were also constructed, used and maintained well by the kings and local people as well. In South India, irrigation were carried out using small tanks and lakes during even Iron Age. In South India, organized irrigation system were in work in 100 AD as per the Sangam literary works. Chola king Karikala, who was famous for constructing a great dam on the river Kaveri, which exists till today. Of course, that has been changed a lot, but however it is still being used by the people. And during 700 to 1200 AD, the enormous growth of irrigation facility took place by Pandyas of Madurai, Pallavas of Kanchi, Cholas of Tanjore, and Hoysala of Karnataka, Chalukyas of Kalani, and Kakatayas of Warangal, using tanks, inundation canal and channels and wells. So, if you look at, there is a great something around 500 years of history are there, who indicates the historical evidence of 500 years indicates that irrigation was the priority of the rulers in the southern India. And Rashtrakuta of Malkhid in the Gulbarga district of Karnataka continued the Deccan tradition of irrigation system for rural development. Most of the irrigation works were initiated and funded by the state, but the maintenance part were managed by the village assembly during Pallava periods. You can see also similar things are mentioned in Arthashastra, that it will be done, initiated by the king, but however it has to be managed by the local people. There are two systems during particularly Cholas period. One is Eri Bariyam, a committee for maintaining works of irrigation system, which consists of 6 members who will hold office for 360 days. Of course, after that there will be change of the guard for the people. And beside this, there is another separate committee which is known as Kalingu Bariyam, and which is in English, if you look at it, is a sluice committee under the village assembly, which will be taking care of the closing of the sluice, maintenance of the sluice gates and other things for controlling the water supply to the fields and other places. So, therefore, it very clearly indicates that there is a system which plays in southern India for the governance of water bodies as well. Not only the construction, but governance of those bodies and how to control that. And during the time of Vikramaditya VI, that big tank was constructed Katagiri, Badami Taluk in Karnataka for draining of excess water from a tank at a higher level to the tank at lower levels. And Chalukyans of Kalani had a separate department for execution and maintenance of irrigation works. They were having a separate department like as of today, And Hoysala dynasty, which lasted around something 1000 to 1400 AD, also took interest in making rain fed tanks and canals, channelize river water to the dry lands for cultivations. Ganapati Deva of Kakatiya dynasty constructed several irrigation works consisting of 100 tanks, rivulets as per the Hanamkonda, Nirostiya, Kabe inscriptions people got during this period, which is talked about this irrigation system carried out by this Kakatiya dynasty. Pakal Lake, which is around 80 square miles, is a very huge lake located 30 miles away from Warangal, lies between Krishna and Munnari river. Ramappa Lake is formed by a ring of hills on three sides with colossal bund on the northern side. If you look at they were choosing the natural places, for example like hills and other things, and they were also joining the rivulets in such that you can have very easily store the water without much constructional work, unlike in the modern system. Well irrigation were also practiced at that time. What do you mean by dam? So, if you look at dams are the barriers either natural or artificial to hold the flow of waters, and dams were in existence in India from time immemorial. The artificial water dams were mentioned in Rig Veda as Rodhas, which were having floodgates like Uddha or Dura, that is the term what they use, and we can think of using the sluice gate in modern time. So, the dam along with the bridge is known as Setu in Sanskrit, Annai in Tamil, and as to the Devi Purana, the Palibandha or the dam provides its measurements to be around 200 cubits for irrigation system. Kunal Jataka, which is around 400 to 500 BC, mention dispute between the Sakya and the Kolia tribes for water distribution from dam across the river Hoini. And if you look at today also, we are having dispute among the states like your Karnataka and Tamil Nadu about the Kaveri water distribution. Similarly, in future also we will be having, because water is going to be very precious things. Therefore, it very much clearly indicates that there is a concern for water and how to save it in ancient India, and also that related technology. And the Sudarshan Lake cum dam in Kathiwara, which was built around 300 to 457 BC, which is very large, like around 278 acres, is earliest known reservoir that serves around 400 years without major repair. Of course, at 150 AD it got damaged by the flood and was repaired by Rudaman, and again burst around 456 AD. This we have already discussed. Let us look at the Grand Anicut Kalanai, which is I had mentioned was basically built on the Kaveri rivers to irrigate the fertile delta region of Kaveri, and Kalanai was constructed with a uncut stone of 329 meter long and 20 meter wide and 5.4 meter high across the mainstream of the Kaveri. If you look at this figure, what I have shown here, it is the modern dam systems in the river Kaveri. It is not the old one, because it was already being changed a lot by the Britishers and later on by the government of India. And this Grand Anicut, which is known as Kalanai, was built by Chola king Karikala around 1st century AD. It is one of the oldest water irrigation system in the world, which is still in use. The main function of the Grand Anicut, as I told earlier, was to keep the waters of Kaveri away from the faster or the steeper Kolidam. I will be showing a picture of Kolidam in the next slide. During normal times, while allowing the flood waters to be safely transported from the Kaveri, which is at higher elevation, to the sea via the Kolidam. Kolidam is the river. So, if you look at, this is the topology of the Kaveri river. This is the Akhand Kaveri, and it gets bifurcated at this point here, and this river, which is the fast stream, is known as Kolidam, which goes to the sea. The other portion, which is known as the Kaveri, like is having several branches here, and this is the delta region, and this is the Grand Anicut which was built by the Chola king Kalikala, and this is a is a very important because this is at a higher elevation. It will be, water will be flowing through this what you call weirs to the fast moving Kolidam river. And as I told earlier, Kalanai was built to harness the water of river Kaveri in times of drought, right. It will be, water will be there in the Kaveri, but during the flood or the water excess, what will happen? This will excess water will be moving from this Kaveri river to the Kolidam, and thus the avoiding the devastation caused due to the flood. Ancient engineers of Bharat had created irrigation system with innumerable small reservoir with networks of irrigation channels, which I will be discussing little later on. And the area irrigated by ancient irrigation network is around 69,000 acres, but by the early 20th century the irrigation land had been increased to about 1 million acres. As I told earlier, this is the river Kolidam and this is the river Kaveri. Of course, bifurcation is somewhere upstream which is not shown in this figure, and today the modern time is these are the all places were being placed, but earlier time it was a dam, what you call the dam was earlier in this region, and nowadays people call entire region as the Grand Anicut. But let me tell you that when the Britishers came in to repair this dam which was not being used for years together due to the war and other things, then they found it was quite difficult. According to one of the British engineer, Baird Smith, in 1856, he has given some evidence writings. He says that for nearly 25 years from the time at which Captain Caldwell's work were completed around 1806, incessant struggle was maintained against increasing tendency of the river bed to silt up. They were finding the problems of silting up, and then in the process what happened, they couldn't understand what is the design, and they made some construction like increasing the height of the dam, and they landed in problems, and these are the problems which are described in this statement. The head and the many parts of the channel were periodically cleared of deposit by manual labor. Long expensive embankments were carried across the bed of the main stream so as to force largest supply of water into Kaveri branch. They were not doing, so they started doing all this thing, and that has spoiled everything. All these efforts, however, were ineffectual, and the bed continued to rise, supply to diminish, the extent of land under irrigation yearly decreased, and they were getting also revenue from that because they are supplying water to the farmers. The revenue was falling off, and the condition of people were visibly becoming worse and worse. About 1829-30, the crisis had been reached. So, their struggle for 25 years, they couldn't really solve the problems because they were not knowing what was the design. So, let me just show you how it looks and what are the things, how design it is, to give you some ideas. This work, this diagrams and other thing, ideas also taken from the paper, that is Tanks and Anicuts of South India, Examples of an Alternative Science of Engineering by Chitra Krishnan and Srinivasa V. Biravalli. And if you look at these are the machinery, which is the actual dam made out of stones, and the shape, if you look at it, is a wavy shape, and these are the earthen buns which we are having, and this also if you look at eastern side, this eastern, this northern side, western side, there is also a bun which is a very important for the maintaining this thing, and there was a war between the two local kings, and they were at loggerhead at that time. They didn't allow for it to maintain. That is why Britisher came into picture, and then they mediate and then do that. So, if you look at the Kaveri, this is the side view of this, like Kaveri was having a higher altitude than the Kolidam. The water has to come from here to there, this side view. And there is another interesting feature of this is that this elevation, if you look at, there is a slope. right. It has a transverse slope descent from the front of the rear side, which makes in some parts regular and smooth slopes, in other irregularly by 3 to 4 steps, and there is something 1 feet 4 inches kind of difference are there. And people do not understand why it is so, what for it is, and what they did, they raised these heights, they raised these heights of this masonry work or the stone work, and then they thought that they will solve the problem, and the problem was what you call host. As I told earlier, these features what you call making these 2 or 3 waves from one and other, there is a wavy structures. Actually its crest was not level but sloping, higher at the western end than the eastern end, that I had shown you, like 1 feet 4 inch kind of things, and it had transverse slopes too, and a descent from the front to rear, which makes in some part of regular and smooth slope, in other parts regular by 3 to 4 steps. Probably needed to be replaced every 5 years, because this maintenance was not being done at that time, and this is a very complicated structure. And why it was so, that the Britisher could understand, but now people are saying it might be due to it will be creating secondary flows which will making the silt to be not settled down but suspended in the water, and that need to be researched. And as I had told you earlier, this overall spread of about 3-4 inch thick of very fine and smooth chunam to prevent the water from making the smallest impressions was need of the hour. I am like, that might be the reason, and this plaster probably needed to be replaced every 5 years. As I had told you earlier, this Grand Anniker's curved form and the transverse longitudinal slopes of its crest transported significant fraction of bed sediments over the Anniker during the floods. That was the design what people are anticipating. Okay, it might be, and it may be, because if the flow is there, there will be secondary flows. If the secondary flow is there, that means recirculation will be there, and that will make the silt to be suspended, and it will be carried over from the Kaveri to the Kolidam. In fact, the first modification done in 1806 AD around by British engineer was made to level the top of the structure, raise it by about 2 feet, and they were not understanding. They said, okay, let us raise the weight, and which created problems of silt deposition, and thus then they couldn't find out there what they did. The overall bed slope from the point of bifurcation Kaveri branch is increased thereby increasing the speed of flow. Hence, its sediments carrying the capacity and preventing any net aggradation. Aggradation means basically the rise of river bed due to the deposition of sand. They have done, but that is not working. Degradation refers to picking up the sediments from the river. Earlier it was doing the degradation, it is picking the silt and taking away. Now, that was the design what we are having. Let me tell you that what this grand what you call Cotton, later on Cotton gave a statement. He says that this statement I had earlier mentioned, let me mention again. It was from them, the native Indians, we learnt how to secure a foundation in the loose sand of unmeasured depth. In fact, what we learned from them made the difference between financial success and failure. For the Madras river irrigation executed by our engineers have been from the first the greatest financial success of any engineering works in the world, solely because we learned from them. Them means native Indians. With this lesson about the foundation, we built bridges, weirs, aqueducts and every kind of hydraulic work. We are thus deeply indebted to the native engineers. So, if you look at this is the things what will be, I will just summarize this, that this is, if you look at the Anniker facilitates the water during the drought, and flood water transferred to the Kolidam along with the silt without silt depositions, right, and the sideways slope silt transferred to the Kolidam during the flood. And if you look at, that means if you summarize it, the traditional automatic desilting, which is very important and which we can learn from them and utilize in the modern systems, and drought water balance and wear hydraulics is also very sophisticated and which need to be looked at. Thank you very much for looking at these lectures, and we will stop over here, and in the next lecture we will be discussing about different aspects of the irrigation system. Thank you.